A very warm welcome to the new episode of Ink and Insights. This is your host, Sumit Sharma Samir. This platform invites global thought leaders and also promotes Nepali changemakers from diverse fields. So please subscribe the channel. This week, my guest is Defne Suman, all the way from Athens, Greece. Defne Suman has written 3 books. Blue Forest is a compilation of essays and journal. She has also written 2 novels, The Silence of Scheherazade and At the Breakfast Table. Born in Istanbul and grew up in Principe Island, Daphne gained a master's in sociology from the Bosphorus University and then worked as a teacher in Thailand and Laos, where she studied Far Eastern philosophy and mystic disciplines. In today's episode, we'll talk about her journey as an author. Daphne, welcome to the Ink and Insights with Sumit Sharma Samir.
Hello, thank you for having me here. It's a great honor.
Thanks, Daphne. I'd love to, start our conversation getting back perhaps to your childhood. When did you start your career as an author?
Well, like you said, I was born in Istanbul, in Turkey, and I grew up in a small island a little bit outside of Istanbul called Principe in Greek and Büyükada in Turkish. It has both names. And I was inside of a very academic family. My grandparents were academicians, professors of philosophy and humanities. My mother is a German linguist, also professor at the university. So all around me, my aunts and my cousins, everybody is into writing, typing. So as a child, this was my natural surrounding: books, people reading books, like spending time in reading books. So I started writing actually when my mother gave me my first diary. And
Right.
I was a good student. She said, "This is your diary, and from now onwards, you will write every day, whatever happened to you." So I was like good student, and I started writing. Today we did this. So I must be around 6, 6, 7, somewhere around that. But before I was a writer, I was a very good reader, and until I was 12, I was an only child. My brother was born very late, when I was 12 years old. So I spent all my childhood alone, reading a lot of books, whatever I can read. And back then in Turkey, we didn't have many children's books. So whatever comes to the market, I was going to the bookstore and almost eating them immediately. So I always say now, today, when they ask me what's the trick to writing, I always say it's reading. Like if you read a lot, the writing comes naturally. Your way of thinking, your mind starts to tell everything in a fictive way. So life becomes like fiction in your mind if you read enough. Literature. If you read literature enough, let's gently, narrow it down. So it started like this. I never thought about it as a career, even though I was obsessed with writing. Like I was writing all the time, like the way the kids today are with their devices, how they're glued to their devices. I was glued to my pen and pencil to a certain level that it bothered my parents, like, you should do something else. But I never thought about as a career. I wanted to do something more glamorous, like become an actress or become an astronaut, something other than writing, because it was something I know. So I resisted for a long time until my 30s to appear in public as a writer. But at the end, a publisher approached me and say, "We want to publish your blogs." I was writing blogs at that time, and the journey started like this.
Right. And did you also try your career in the field of art, or as an artist? Did you try your career there as well?
I studied sociology, and I did my master's of arts in sociology. So for some time, I worked as a family tradition. I worked in the university as an academician, but that was a bit too dry. I didn't want to do that. So I was looking for something else. And in almost all my 20s, I searched for what am I going to do. So I I went to Thailand. I did volunteer teaching English, and then I went to Laos, and I traveled. And then I started teaching yoga, and I still teach yoga today.
Oh,
It's like,
interesting.
yeah, I say it's my day job. It's mainly my main income comes from actually teaching yoga. So that's how. Then after the age 30, I started writing and publishing. Like writing was always with me, but publishing started after I was 30.
Right, right. And you seem to have moved to different places, as you
I
just
do.
mentioned. Yeah. And how has your, multicultural upbringing influenced your writing?
Well, they say, whoever reads my astrological map, they say like the traveling is in you from day one. You were destined to travel, and you're always attracted to foreign places. And I was like that from the very early onwards. I definitely knew that I didn't want to stay in Turkey. Not necessarily I didn't like Turkey. Opposite, I loved my country. I still do, but I was so curious about the other parts of the world. And I think the reason I studied sociology at university was part of that. Like, how can I study other cultures? How can I get to
Right,
know the world?
right,
I wanted to, at that point, I wanted to become a journalist. So I was
right.
hoping that I would be like an international journalist and to be sent to different places to do
Different
research.
places. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So I think it definitely enriched me when I mean, like I am one of the few authors from Turkey whose books are translated to many languages. I have 25 books now translated my books are translated to 25 plus
25.
different languages.
Right,
And
right.
I do have a good agent and all that, and the books are speaking to a universal truth, I think. So it's not local. I mean, it has local features, local flavors, but
Right.
it helped me, all the traveling helped me to understand as human beings, we are very similar. Wherever we go, we find the same spirit of the human beings. Our needs are very, same. So it helped me to write at a more universal level, and that helped me to my books to travel to different languages of the world, I think.
Right, right. Definitely your first, I think, fiction. I think you'd like to call it a historical fiction, The Silence of Scheherazade, if I have pronounced it
Mhm.
correctly. Can you
Correct.
shed some light on this book, please?
This is an historical fiction. It's because it was my first book. I think I was young and very courageous. Now it's in Turkey. It's been published 10 years ago, and I don't know if I can do something like that ever again. It's taking place, really seriously, it's taking place in a place that I have no idea. I had no idea by the time I was writing it. It's a time that I don't know, I know nothing about. But I heard the calling, said, okay, I'm going to write this book. So
Right.
it's taking place it begins in 1905 in the harbor town in the Ottoman Empire called Smyrna.
Right.
Smyrna in 1905 belongs to Ottoman Empire, and then as the First World War begins and the empire loses the war, it's given to the Greek administration, and then the Turkish independence movement begins, and then it's been captured by the Turkish army again, and it becomes part of the modern Turkish Republic, which is today we call Izmir. So I wanted to write these turbulent times from the eyes of the women who lived in the city while the men are fighting and deciding and all that. What's happening to the women of
Okay.
Smyrna? The town was like all the Mediterranean towns back then. It was multicultural, multilingual. It was rich. They had figs, they had tobacco, they had grapes, like a very rich town. And it was destroyed into ashes by the time the 20th century finished its first quarter. And like the multiculturalism is lost, the languages were lost, Greeks were gone, killed or pushed out of, Armenians no more. So it became like a, one language one nation, one religion kind of a, still not boring, I can't say boring, but it lost its layers. And I wanted to write the story of this loss. How did we lose cosmopolitan Smyrna? And now we have this nationalistic Izmir in its place.
Right.
From the eyes of its women.
Right. Interesting. So how do you approach, the process of research for your historical fiction like this one?
I always write something related to the past, whether it's a past of the entire society or the past of my character. And when I say the past of my character, I always think about the grandparents. Like I'm very much influenced by the Indian, like post-colonial literature, like Salman Rushdie, Arundhati Roy, how they bring me the idea of you are not just you. Your grandparents are in you. So when I start writing, I think about a character, I think about their grandparents, and then of course I start thinking about the past of the country, because we're never independent of what's happening in the world around us. But I do research on the basis of need. So example, The Silence of Shehrazad begins with an Indian spy arriving to the harbor of Smyrna.
Interesting.
Yes, his name is Avinash Pillai. Avinash Pillai is actually working for the Queen, but he appears as a gemstone merchant. So I came up with this character, and then he's arriving to Smyrna. It's 1905. The month is September. He's coming from Mumbai. What kind of a boat is he going to take? Or, and I started researching, Mumbai to Smyrna, 1905. What's the route? And I find it. He needs to go to Mumbai to here, and then Port Said to Alexandria to Leros. And so the research is always on the basis of need. And there's always need to research something.
Right. And do you write in English language?
I write in Turkish.
You write in Turkish, and
yes.
Do you translate yourself, or there's someone else who?
So I have a very good translator, very sweet lady, an American woman who has been living in Turkey for 50 years, 60 years. She's 80 years old now. She lives in a small island in Turkey. And she's a literature lover. She wasn't a translator. I found her by, through a friend of a friend of a friend. And I said, do you want to do this? And she said, let's try. She sent me a little passage and I really liked it. So I work with her. Her name is Betsy Göksel. She translates chapter by chapter. She sends it to me. I send some feedback. We change certain things, and then that's how we work. She translated all my books.
तिमीसँग अब धेरै टाइम छैन है बिहे गर्नु छ भने गरिहाल नत्र घरबाट मलाई अन्त्य बिहे गर्दिनु भर्खर 3 वर्ष भयो एमबीबीएस जोइन गरेको 5 वर्षको कोर्स हो के भो जम्मा छ एक्सक्यूज मी सर मेरो 5 वर्षको कोर्स 3 वर्षमा सकाउन मिल्दैन गेट आउट हेलो के सोच्यो त के सोच्ने मैले प्रिन्सिपलसँग पनि कुरा गरिसके 3 वर्षमा पनि के हुन्छ 3 वर्षमा
के भयो भाइ ल बस साउजी एक कप चिया कसले भन्यो 3 वर्षमा के हुँदैन भनेर यो हेर एलआईसी नेपालको धनवृष्टि योजनामा 3 वर्षमा पैसा फिर्ता हुन्छ
ए हो र
जीवन बीमाको साथमा धनवृष्टि 3 वर्षमा एलआईसी नेपालको धनवृष्टि योजना एलआईसी नेपाल
Okay, definitely. You also pointed out very interestingly that you spend a lot of time in yoga. And does yoga also play an important role in your literature writing?
I think yoga, I am coming from, my guru is from the lineage of Goraknath. So we are a very deep traditional, it's not like a commercial yoga. We are a small community and studying very seriously. And I think when you practice and when you take yoga really seriously, it unlocks your imagination and it unlocks your creativity in a way that as your ego disappears, your creativity comes out. Because in order to write, you really have to move out as with your ego, right? The story has to take over. Sometimes I think it would be much nicer if we don't put our names on the books, because only the story matters, and story travels. Story remains many generations and generations. So yoga really helps me to unlock that creative energy. I think when I don't do my yoga in the mornings, that day is like lots of doubts. Oh, this is not very good. People will not like this. And then when I do my yoga in the morning, these are not important, what people will think, because it's not about you. This is about you are a vehicle to transfer a story into human beings, into humanity. That clarity comes to me.
Right. And can you share a memorable experience from your traveling that has influenced your works?
I think so. Like now I don't know a life where I didn't travel. So it's hard for me to compare. But I know other writers who spend all their lives in Turkey, for example. They don't speak English, or maybe they speak English, but they are timid about it. So they don't really communicate with the people outside of Turkey. They don't know writers outside of Turkey. That's a limited existence. And I'm so happy that I had the courage to leave my country at a young age and, sail out to see the world and meet all the people that I have met, lived all the experiences that I experienced. Definitely that helps me to write more layered, maybe more fun things, because what I noticed, people who remained in Turkey all of their lives, they're very serious. They're always writing things like my generation. The younger ones are different. The younger ones are very funny. But my generation, they're serious. They always have to have a political aspect to their fiction. Light, certain subjects are defined as light, so you don't use them. So I think getting out of your country helps you to see the world, and that's the core of spirituality, actually. You can't take anything too seriously, while the only truth is everything is passing and changing.
True. Very much agree with what you are saying, Defne. I think At the Breakfast Table is your recent book. Can you shed some light on that one?
It's my most autobiographical book, because it's taking place in the island that I grew up, Büyükada, or in Greek, Prinkipo Island, the Prince Islands in English. It's a small island, but it's very dear to my heart. So I wanted to have, we were a middle-class family, academicians, as I said, but the island has so many very rich families living in these beautiful houses with gardens. And so all my life, all my childhood, I looked at their houses and wondered what's happening inside of these houses. So in this book, I created this story of this family living inside one of those mansions that I was looking as a child and being fascinated by them. So it's taking place around the breakfast table. Like all my books, the question is identity. Are you really the person who you think you are? Or is there a secret in the upper generations which will actually shift everything you believe about yourself? So this is a family who believed to be that they are so and so, and then it turns out that they were actually not so and so. So I don't want to give spoilers. And then under that new truth, they have to redefine themselves and redefine their relationships to one another and to the world. So that's the premise. But I enjoyed myself very much writing the island, writing the funny scenes. And one thing I did, which I liked very much, there are 4 narrators in that book. 4 people are telling the same story today. same day, 4 of them are telling from different angles. So we have an understanding of that day, but also the history of that family, and also history of Turkey together. So it's like one table and other tables all around it, circling each other.
So you think your work is going to contribute to the understanding of Turkish Ottoman history. Does this book also does that?
This is mainly for the Turkish readers. I have desire for them to look at the history a little bit different from what they studied in the history books. Okay. Because, and then for the other nations, like for the people of Nepal, for example, if they can look at their own history books and say, maybe things were different. I'm not writing about Nepal, but if that mentality can transfer, let's question the past. Let's see on the other. Let's be on the other side and look to the same story from the other side. Like this flexibility of the mind, I want. Other than like, I don't care. Ottoman Empire comes and goes. Everything, they come and go. But the flexibility of the mind, if you can see things differently, that would bring freedom to individuals. Right. So that's what matters for me. Can you feel more free? Yeah.
It's more of the different frameworks and perspectives wherein you give space to look at the things from different angles, right?
Yeah, like if you are stuck in the framework of your nation state and you never go beyond it, you believe in that narrative that is repeated to you on the TV, on the schools, and you become so lonely and so closed up, and everybody becomes an enemy. And that's the opposite of freedom. That's being a prisoner. So that's my aim, is to see, look, if you go out there, you will find people very similar to you. So there is no such thing as enemy. I think that's what we need today the most, like getting out of ourselves and looking into the other and seeing, wow, okay, this is a human being too.
Right. And how much are you criticized for the framework or for the perspectives that you hold, and how do you handle it?
Criticism, well, first of all, let's remember, most readers in the world are women. Right now, the women are becoming like the biggest reader. And women, in general, by nature, they are more prone to flexibility. They're more, their minds can crack and open more easily. So most of them, they say, oh, this was like my perspective shifted. Wonderful. Thank you so much. Some of them, some men also, they criticize, but it was like, I always try to show things from every perspective. So I don't leave really room for criticism because, okay, everybody says, okay, like, yes, there's inevitability of the events. So when there's inevitability, everything had to happen the way they happened. Right. People don't find much room. But when there is like, sometimes there are like ridiculous criticisms, like I just ignore them. I think all writers should ignore like the reviews that are in the, reviews that are not done by people who understand literature, but who are like really shallow readers. They are the worst enemies of the authors today.
Right. Definitely. And what are your thoughts on the current status of Turkish literature?
Turkish literature has a very big young authorship right now. It's growing. It's going really good. Short story writers, novel writers. It's a tight community. We see each other. We are always in communication. We have lots of festivals, but it's still very much closed inside the country. And that's not because of, this is not the fault of Turkish authors. This is because the translated literature is not the highest priority of the global reader. Like when we read something, when we are about to pick our next book, usually we pick something written originally in English or originally in our own language. So all of the other writers in between. And so I think as authors, we have to, Turkish authors, I don't know, Nepalese authors, we all have to work to have this cross-cultural bridging, not through English, but immediate translations from our own languages to enrich this is what I'm hoping to get more, like without skipping English markets. Can we reach to each other through the translation of our own languages?
Right. That should be interesting. And what are your future projects?
I'm working on a book now, like almost 2 years, and it's not a big one. It's actually one of the smallest ones, but it's going very slowly. And I wrote very fast up to this point in my life. Like I had a project, I had an idea, and I wrote very fast. Now this one, I think I don't want to repeat the same thing, so I want to come up with something new. So I'm trying to finish it. I'm going to India on the 20th of January. So before I go to India, I'm trying to finish this book.
Wonderful.
And then after finishing this, I have another idea. I want to write a historical fiction taking place in Istanbul. I always find short story writing a challenge. I write big novels, but short story is a challenge for me. So I want to develop my ability to write short stories.
Right. And what has been the most rewarding part of your writing career so far?
Writing itself. Like when the writing flows, it's an amazing joy. And it doesn't happen all the time. I don't want to I don't want to say and make our listeners think that, oh, okay, she's writing. No, very, very rarely you have a flow. And when that flow comes, it's really God talking to you. It's really some source is whispering a story to you. You have to type it, but it happens very rarely, but that's the most rewarding. I think that's why we are writing. Otherwise you would go crazy with this thing. Like you spend years in your room, like my room behind me. Not much money coming from there. Everybody has to work somewhere else. Why do we write? Because there's this deep satisfaction, deep fulfillment in coming up with a story. Right.
And how do you envision the future of storytelling in the digital age?
Well, storytelling will always remain with us. Like we cannot exist as a species. We cannot exist without storytelling. I'm sure there will always be books. There will always be more and more. Actually, I like digital age because, first of all, I can listen to the books now. That was my childhood dream. I'm very happy that I'm able to listen most of the books. I like knitting, so I knit and I listen to books, and I do housework and I listen to books. So I think the more we have through technology, the more we have means, the more we will be actually in our everyday lives. We have more books, more stories. There is I'm looking at the number of people like joining creative writing classes, joining book clubs. Like it wasn't like that. There's for the last, 4 or 5 years, people are so thirsty to be more and more acquainted with the storytelling, either writing or reading. So this is indicating a deep desire to be connected through the stories.
Right. And definitely think that the younger generation in Turkey are more interested in coming up with the books, and the market is expanding, and there is a lot of opportunities for the authors there.
There's not many opportunities because there's not much money. So with the economic crisis that we are all having, the young authors, the ones who have not been published up to this point, the ones who have not have their names out there, they stand very little. Like the ones who are published, they're going good and they're writing very good stuff. But the ones who are coming to the market now, their chances are so slim because basically something like the paper being so expensive is becoming like an obstacle. And still we are a generation, maybe this will change, this will definitely change, but we're still a generation, if your book is not in paper, you don't count.
Yeah, true.
Right? You still need a publisher. Like if you self-publish, again, Yeah, but self-published, right?
Exactly.
Like you still, in order to be regarded as an author, you still need to have a publisher and you need to have a paper, like your story on a paper. This
True.
definitely will change. Everything will shift, but in our lifetimes, we're not going to see that. And this creates, this blocks the young ones. So they will find their own ways because human beings can adapt and find their
Right.
own ways. But one thing will remain, it's like a river that will always flow. It's our need to tell stories and hear stories.
Exactly. Completely agree with that, definitely. And on that note, I'd like to wish you good luck because, as you mentioned to me, that you are attending a couple of literary fest in India, and I do hope that you can also make to Nepal at some point of time. And
I would love
once
to.
again, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me here. It was great. And I hope our listeners enjoyed our conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you.